word for word translation. Tasmin api, in that ashram, referring to Pulaha ashram. Kalam, the end of the duration of the life in the deer body. Pratikshamanaha, always waiting for. Sangat, from association. Cha, and. Brisham, constantly. Udvignaha, full of anxiety. Atma sahat charaha, having the super soul as the only constant companion. And in parentheses, no one should think of being alone. Shushka parna trina virudha, by eating only the dry leaves and herbs. Vartamana, existing. Mrigatva nimitta, of the cause of the deer's body. Avasanam, the end. Eva, only. Ganayam, considering. Mriga shiriram, the deer of the body. The body of the deer. Tirta udaka klinam, bathing in the water of that holy place. Utsa sarja, gave up. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Remaining in that ashram, the great King Bharat Maharaj was now very careful not to fall victim to bad association. Without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in that ashram and ate dry leaves only. He was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the Supersoul. In this way, he waited for death in the body of a deer. Bathing in that holy place, he finally gave up that body. Purport. Holy places like Vrindavan, Hardwar, Prayag, and Jagannath Puri are especially meant for the execution of devotional service. Vrindavan specifically is the most exalted and preferred holy place for Vaishnava devotees of Lord Krishna who are aspiring to return back to Godhead, the Vaikuntha planets. There are many devotees of Vrindavan who regularly bathe in the Yamuna, and this cleanses all the contamination of the material world. By constantly chanting and hearing the holy names and pastimes of the Supreme Lord, one certainly becomes purified and becomes a fit candidate for liberation. However, if one purposely falls victim to sense gratification, he has to be punished, at least for one lifetime, like Bharat Maharaj. Translation again. Remaining in that ashram, the great King Bharat Maharaj was now very careful not to fall victim to bad association. Without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in that ashram and ate dry leaves only. He was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the Supersoul. In this way, he waited for death in the body of a deer. Bathing in that holy place, he finally gave up that body. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shavakaya Chakshur Unmeditam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivas Adi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I forgot to read the conclusion of the purport. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 5th canto, 8th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled A Description of the Character of Bharat Maharaj. So this is the conclusion of the chapter where Bharat Maharaj takes the body of deer. And in the next chapter, we'll learn about Jad Bharat, his next life. In the purport, Prabhupada stresses the importance of the holy Dham. And so I wanted to glorify Gita Nagari because it's not part of Bharat Varsha, geographically at least. However, it is a holy Dham, and it's very potent and it's very special. Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj illustrated this fact by choosing to leave his body there in that place at Gita Nagari. And so Prabhupada's bringing up this point that the holy dhams are very purifying and very auspicious. And Bharat Maharaj, he specifically went to the Pulaha ashram. He went to the forest of Shalagram and to the ashram of Pulastya and Pulaha. I don't know who these saints are, but their names are in the Bhagavatam. They must be quite exalted. And Bharat Maharaj, even though he's in the body of a deer, he left his home and he specifically went to this ashram so he could be in the association of saintly devotees, be in an auspicious setting, and so he could bide his time patiently and leave his body auspiciously. He knew he made a mistake. He was gravely repenting his mistake. He knew he was in the deer body, and he wanted to be sure to continue his practice and cultivation of bhakti in his next life, which requires a human body. And so he patiently accepted his mistake, repented for it, and concentrated on staying in this ashram. And of course, he was in the deer body, so it's not like he could associate in a human way with other saintly persons. However, he waited patiently to take a more auspicious birth in a human body. And you can do this at Gita Nagari. You can do this in other holy dhams. Gita Nagari is quite special. Anybody who's visited there, anybody who has lived there especially, knows how purifying it is, especially if you have a sincere, specific desire for that purification. You will get it very intensely at Gita Nagari, which is wonderful because purification is really the name of the game for cultivating bhakti, because cultivating bhakti requires cleansing of the consciousness, and that cleansing is purification. Yeah, so he stayed. It's interesting. In this verse it says he remained in that ashram. However, he was in the deer body, and he was very careful not to fall victim to bad association. So he's in the deer body, and he's very carefully trying not to become contaminated, his consciousness. And the next sentence is very interesting. It says, well, actually, before I get to that, he was in this ashram, so he's in an auspicious setting where saintly persons are practicing their practices. I don't know if they're bhakti specifically, but it's an auspicious setting, and it says that he would bathe regularly for purification, and he practiced austerity. It says he ate dry leaves only. He was in a repenting mood, and he was practicing austerities, being very careful not to contaminate himself with association that might distract him. And so he was taking his regulative principles very, very seriously because he understood that grave mistake that he had made. And the sentence is interesting. It says, without disclosing his past to anyone, he remained in that ashram and ate dry leaves only. This is interesting because he's in a deer body, and one could think, how could he disclose his past to anyone? Disclose his past as being the great king Bharat Maharaj, the saintly king. Certainly, I mean, I don't think deer have vocal cords, and even if they do, they certainly can't chant Hare Krishna or speak in Sanskrit or any other human dialogue. However, this is because he has his memory is intact. This is an indication that his intelligence is also intact. And so, if he really wanted to, he could find a way to express himself to the saintly persons that are there. As I have mentioned in a previous class a while ago, intelligence is an inherent aspect of the spirit soul. It has nothing to do with material matter. It is not a product of material matter. It is inherent to the spirit soul. And memory specifically is a component of intelligence, according to the Bhagavatam. And so, since Bharat Maharaj is in this dear body, we can infer that his intelligence, he's in this dear body and he remembers his past life. He's aware of his mistake. He's aware that he was King Bharat Maharaj, and he's aware that he's in a dear body now. Thus, we can infer that his intelligence, at least to some degree, is also intact. And so, if he really wanted to, he could disclose his past. I don't know what that would look like, but in that deer body, I'm sure he could think of something. If you see a deer acting in a very, very strange way, and you're a saintly person, and your intelligence is also extremely sharp, there could be some communication there. So Prabhupada makes his point that he didn't disclose it to anyone. He remained humble and focused. Disclosing that information to the other saints might have been very distracting for him. It could trigger pride, and overall could just be a very big distraction. And so he stayed focused. I just got to get through this dear body. I just got to get through this lifetime and get in a human body. And so I can cultivate further my practice. The next sentence is also very nice. Prabhupada explains in the translation, it says, he was not exactly alone, for he had the association of the super soul. This is really nice. All of us have this association, whether we're aware of it or not, whether we are cultivating it or not, whether we are realized in this aspect or not, we all have it. Krishna is in our heart, in every living entity's heart as Paramatma. And so you're never exactly alone. And of course, depending on your cultivation of bhakti, that relationship can be quite dynamic. And so the chances of actually feeling that loneliness and experiencing it can be minimal, depending on our cultivation of Krishna consciousness. I asked my Guru Maharaj once about spiritual intuition. And he said to me, yes, it exists. However, one's senses must be purified. In other words, you can get guidance from the super soul within, and you can reduce those feelings of loneliness by having a dynamic relationship with the super soul within your heart. However, it requires purification, just like I mentioned a few minutes ago, that cultivation of bhakti in general requires purification, many, many layers of purification. And I'll read a verse from the Bhagavatam that speaks about this relationship with Paramatma within. This is from the 4th canto, 28th chapter, verse 41. I don't remember the context of this chapter and verse, so please forgive me. But it says, in this way, King Malayadhvaj attained perfect knowledge because in his pure state, he was directly instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By means of such enlightening transcendental knowledge, he could understand everything from all angles of vision. So this verse is referring to King Malayadhvaj being Paramatma realized, and he was taking guidance from within. Similarly, we can see that Bharat Maharaj is also taking this association from Paramatma while he's in the dear body. He can't communicate with human beings. Well, he could if he really wanted to, but he also understands that could be a huge distraction. So he's just staying focused, and he's taking guidance and taking love and support and encouragement from within. And the purport to this verse in the 4th canto, Prabhupada says, In this verse, the words Sakshad Bhagavat Bhagavat Toktena Guruna Harina are very significant. The Supreme Personality of Godhead speaks directly to the individual soul when the devotee has completely purified himself by rendering devotional service to the Lord. So, as I just mentioned, this is possible and it comes, but it requires purification. And to reiterate at the beginning, I was glorifying Gita Nagari. Living on the Dham is very, very purifying, especially if you want it. If you want it and you pray for it, you will most certainly get it. Of course, there's some fine print there that I won't get into detail, but if we really want to achieve prema, if we really want to cultivate this bhakti, the purification is there. It needs to happen. But the question is, how fast does one want to go? How fast are we willing to go? How much are we willing to tolerate to experience that love, to experience that relationship? That will vary from person to person. However, living on a Dham like Gita Nagari is a very special opportunity, especially here in America. We're thousands of miles away from Bharat, from the land of Bharat, and where there's Vrindavan, Jagannath Puri. We don't have many of us don't even have the luxury of visiting there, what to speak of living there. But we have Gita Nagari, which is just as wonderful. Okay, continue with the purport. Prabhupada says, Lord Krishna confirms this also in Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 10. Te shanam satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Prabhupada says, further, the Lord is the super soul seated in everyone's heart, and he acts as the Chaitya Guru, the spiritual master within. However, he gives direct instructions only to the advanced pure devotees. In the beginning, when a devotee is serious and sincere, the Lord gives him directions from within to approach a bona fide spiritual master. Some of us, or probably many of us, have had this experience of receiving some apparently unexplained intuition to be guided to a certain location, a certain person, a certain time and place, and boom, they were devotees. There was your future Guru Maharaj. I think I could say most of us, if not all of us, have had these experiences. This is the super soul, indirectly, kind of in a hidden way, guiding us towards the spiritual master, towards the devotees. And then later on, as we get purified, that relationship becomes more clear. There's not as much static. There's more clarity there. We'll continue with Prabhupada's purport. Yeah, so he gives direct instructions only to the advanced pure devotees. In the beginning, when the devotee is serious and sincere, the Lord gives them directions from within to approach a bona fide spiritual master. When one is trained by the spiritual master according to the regulative principles of devotional service and is situated on the platform of spontaneous attachment for the Lord, Raga Bhakti, the Lord also gives instructions from within. Desham sapta yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam dadami buddhi yogam tam. This distinct advantage is obtained obtained by a liberated soul. Having attained to this stage, King Malayadwaj was directly in touch with the Supreme Lord and was receiving instructions from him directly. The Prabhupada's illustrating that we are guided from within and on an intuitive level, mostly beyond our conscious understanding, to a spiritual master, to the devotees, to the process of Krishna consciousness. As we practice and as we get this purification, our senses become purified, our mind becomes purified, our consciousness overall becomes more purified. And then there starts to be some clear instructions there. This is especially attainable at the stage of spontaneous attraction, or raga bhakti. And King Bharat was at the stage of bhav. And I can't remember the technicalities, but I'm pretty sure that at the stage of bhav, there is raga bhakti, there is spontaneous attraction. And so we can see this. He wasn't alone. He had the guidance and the relationship of the Lord within while he was in this dear body, which I can imagine was very inspiring and strengthening for him, because being in that dear body and not be able to chant, not being able to practice his bhajan must have been very painful. It must have been very challenging. I was thinking about trying to put myself in his situation, how challenging that must have been to be in a body that cannot afford you the glorious opportunity of cultivating your Krishna consciousness, and knowing you just have to wait it out. You have to be careful, you have to be focused, and just wait it out. What an immense amount of patience that requires. And I've been thinking about this point of patience frequently. We live in Kali Yuga, and everything is instantaneous gratification. So practicing patience, it's throughout the Shastra. Prabhupada reiterates it over and over again. One needs patience. And that is the exact opposite of what is happening throughout the entire world. The current is pushing us in the opposite direction of being patient. And so I've been thinking about this and meditating on it and talking with devotees about this. And I'll read from the Nectar of Instruction about patience. But before that, I will read the Merriam-Webster definition of patience. I love to look up the definitions of English words, especially when they're in Prabhupada's purports and in the translations, because I assume, like other languages as well, one word can have numerous definitions. But depending on the people we grow up with, the things that we, persons that we listen to, the books that we read, even though there may be multiple definitions for one word, one definition will most likely become prominent to us. And so when we hear that word, we'll associate it with one definition. But also, Prabhupada was extremely careful and conscientious and aware of the English words he chose to put in his books. To illustrate this point, I will share, I was watching a Prabhupada memory video of Hansadutta Prabhu. I believe he's originally from Germany. And he was sharing that Prabhupada wanted him to do some service. I can't remember the specifics. And Hansadutta Prabhu said, I never even graduated high school, and you want me to preach or do whatever with these persons that I don't even speak their language. And Prabhupada said, it's okay. I didn't know English either. And Prabhupada said, I carry everywhere I go, I carry around with me an English dictionary. And so this really hit me. This really stood out to me. And then thereafter, reading Prabhupada's books, I love to look up definitions of words. I found it extremely helpful for studying Prabhupada's books and making sense of things on a deeper level. And so, interestingly, I found that if you look up the word patience, which is very much required in bhakti, and in Bharat Maharaj's case, good Lord, intense patience is required to deal with having that dear body, and even the body, his next body, as Jad Bharat. But interestingly, there's four, or actually I think there's even five. Anyway, I wrote down four. There's four definitions of the word patience. One of them has to do with the reference that I made earlier. In Kali Yuga, everything is impetuous. You're pushed to do something sooner than maybe it should be done. Hastiness. That's the third definition of it. Not hasty or impetuous. And that's the definition that I most often associate with patience. You need to slow down and just wait patiently for whatever to manifest or not manifest. However, that's only one of the definitions. The other three definitions of patience have to do with tolerance. The first says bearing pains or trials calmly or without complaint. The second is manifesting forbearance under provocation or strain. And the fourth is steadfast despite opposition, difficulty, or adversity. And so I found this very eye-opening. When Prabhupada uses this word patience, we can really look at it twofold. One aspect of it is what the way I understand it for most of my life is not being impetuous, not being impulsive or compulsive, not being hasty. The second aspect of it is to be tolerant and the many variations that can manifest. And so I'll read from the Nectar of Instruction. Rupa Goswami, if I remember correctly, is giving us instructions on how to cultivate our Krishna consciousness. This is in text 3. It says there are 6 principles favorable to the execution of pure devotional service. 1, being enthusiastic. 2, endeavoring with confidence. 3, being patient. 4, acting according to regulated principles, such as Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, hearing, chanting, and remembering Krishna. Number 5, abandoning the association of non-devotees. And 6, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. These 6 principles undoubtedly assure the complete success of pure devotional service. So we can see Bharat Maharaj in this verse alone, you can see he's practicing these. He must have enthusiasm, otherwise, he would just run off and just act like a deer, right? So he has enthusiasm, he has confidence, otherwise he would also just give up if he didn't have that confidence. How could you tolerate such an extremely difficult situation? He's being patient, he's exercising tolerance, and he's not being impetuous or compulsive. He's patiently waiting for his natural death to come. In the Chaitanya Charitamrita is the pastime of Sanatana Goswami. He is fed up with his body. He finds it to be repulsive, and he wants to jump in front of the cart of the Rathiyaja cart and kill himself, kill his body. Of course, Lord Chaitanya is omniscient. He knows about this and he confronts him. He says, look, you can't do that. Your body belongs to me. You have surrendered yourself to me. And I have a lot of plans for your body because you can do a lot of things that I can't do. And so I need you to stay in the body you are in now until I decide it's time for you to go. You can't just commit suicide on a whim. And then he goes into further detail how this suicide is strictly the result of tamagun. And so you can see the same thing here with Bharat Maharaj. He didn't try to prematurely end his dear body. He waited patiently for the natural death to come, all the while tolerating the difficulties of being in that body and having that memory and that intelligence of being such an exalted devotee. Acting according to regulated principles. You can see that he was practicing austerity. He was eating only dry leaves. He was bathing regularly. So, of course, he doesn't have the human body to practice all the regulative principles. Well, actually, I guess he could have practiced hearing. He could have practiced hearing the saints that were living in the ashram. He could have practiced chanting as well. He could have chanted in his mind. So I guess he could have practiced many regulative principles, actually. Of course, the ones that are limited to having a human body. Abandoning the association of non-devotees. He left his home. He left his dear mother and dear family or whoever, and he went to the ashram that he previously used to inhabit. And then 6, following the footsteps of the previous acharyas. In my opinion, you can see this in the fact that he is taking association from the supersoul within. I had an interesting realization about this point, following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. And I don't think I'll explain the whole realization here, but this point about following the footsteps of previous acharyas implies cultivating your personal relationship with Krishna. And that involves understanding Krishna is with you all the time, no matter where you are. In fact, nothing exists outside of Krishna. And so the fact that Prabhupada mentions here, he was not alone. He had the association of the supersoul. And in his previous body, he was in the stage of bhava. He had spontaneous attraction. So, in my opinion, you can see he's following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas. He practiced in his previous life. He got up to that stage. He made a huge mistake. However, he didn't necessarily lose his merit. In my last class, I mentioned there's no loss, there's no diminution. He had to rectify his mistake and repent his mistake by taking the birth in a deer body. However, he was still following in the footsteps of the previous acharyas because he was cultivating his personal relationship with Krishna and advancing that relationship, deepening that relationship. Okay, so I'll read a little bit of Prabhupada's purport to end this verse in the Nectar of Instruction. Prabhupada says, these activities must be executed with patience. One should not be impatient in Krishna consciousness. And remember, I just read the definitions of patience is twofold. One is not being hasty, and the other side is being tolerant. Indeed, this Krishna consciousness movement was started single-handedly, and in the beginning, there was no response. But because we continue to execute our devotional activities with patience, people gradually began to understand the importance of this movement, and now they are eagerly participating. So Prabhupada underwent intense situations, and he was very, very tolerant. He was patient. And he also understood that he's trying his best. He's making the best effort that he can, but the results are not up to him, it's up to Krishna. And so he wasn't hasty, he wasn't impulsive. He continued his service as he saw fit to the best of his ability, all the while waiting for Krishna to produce whatever results Krishna desired. One should not be impatient in discharging devotional service, but should take instructions from the spiritual master and execute them with patience, depending on the mercy of Guru and Krishna. The successful execution of Krishna conscious activities requires both patience and confidence. And then Prabhupada gives an interesting example here. This example might not be as impactful for certain persons in the world today, especially, well, I grew up in America, so I can see how a modern American might not understand his example here. But Prabhupada grew up in India. Not only that, but India, before it became radically, I don't want to use that word, intensely westernized. And so he gives the example of a young girl who gets married to her husband, and naturally she wants a child, and she wants a child soon. And in modern America and many other Western countries, or maybe even the whole world, not everybody's going to have that desire. But the example he gives is very applicable. So within that context, he says, a newly married girl naturally expects offspring from her husband, but she cannot expect to have them immediately after marriage. Of course, as soon as she is married, she can attempt to get a child, but she must surrender to her husband, confident that her child will develop and be born in due time. Similarly, in devotional service, surrender means that one has to become confident. The devotee thinks, Avashya Rakshive Krishna. Krishna will surely protect me and give me help for the successful execution of devotional service. This is called confidence. So, a young girl who wants a child immediately may marry a man and expect that child to come immediately. But it's a relationship. There's two persons, there's two individuals, and there has to be some cooperation, there has to be some give and take there. Similarly, our cultivation of bhakti is a relationship with Krishna, with other devotees. And so there has to be give and take, there has to be patience there. However, he stresses, so there must be patience, and he stresses there must be confidence that I've married this person and they said they also want the child and they will give me the child, but I have to be patient for him to agree when the time is right for it to come. And so similarly, we execute our bhakti to the best of our ability, all the while understanding Krishna is also an independent person. And when he decides and how he decides he would like to bestow his mercy, that will be on him. But we try our best all the while, being confident that he will reciprocate. Okay, that's all I had prepared, and I'm not feeling too spontaneous today. So if anybody has any comments or corrections, please share. Who here thinks they can tolerate being in a deer body? Who here thinks they can tolerate being in a human body?
Well, I'm struggling just to be in this particular broken body. It's miserable.
Yeah.
I'm terrified of the thought of another birth, particularly animal birth, is really unappealing. You know, if you think about what it really entails, it's very disturbing. In the human species, we have the ability to at least attempt to take measures to mitigate, and that option really is typically not at all available to the animals. They just are subject to all kinds of miseries, and there is really nothing they can do about it. You know, deer, from a distance, they look very nice. They seem happy, and they're pleasing to observe. But if you actually see them close up, you see that they are covered with insects. They'll have, you look at their face, you'll see that they're covered with lice, and there are ticks crawling here and there. They are, you know, they're food for all kinds of parasites, and they're also food for a host of predators, although humans have eliminated a lot of those predators now, but deer species, one of the characteristic features of deer life is that they are always fearful. They're in a constant state of fearfulness because they are relatively defenseless creatures and food for all kinds of predators. They are, whether the predators are there or not, they remain always in a heightened state of fear and vigilance, always concerned that at some point in time they may be predated. And their only defense is that they can run, they can flee in the event that someone tries to capture them, but otherwise they don't really have much by way of defenses. So their life is very, very fearful. You see it in lots of species. You watch birds foraging for food. You'll see that they'll put their head down to peck at something, and then immediately they pick their head up and they look this way and that way, constantly vigilant. There's never a moment when they're not in fear.
This is mentioned today in the verse, the word udvigna, full of anxiety.
Right.
Bart Maharaj was full of anxiety.
Yeah, it's in the human species, we are sometimes troubled by terrible anxiety. Anxiety is, is really the hallmark of material existence. It's it goes hand in hand with material existence. There's always anxiety, and in all across many species, and especially in human life, people are typically they're always in anxiety. They go to see professionals. They take all kinds of medications. Sometimes they suffer dependencies on different medications, trying to somehow mitigate their anxiety. They don't understand why they feel so much anxiety, and they have no idea how to solve the problem. They just suffer burning, agonizing anxiety day and night. It deprives them of sleep. It's an incredibly hellish condition. Probably most of us have experienced what that's like, having once, maybe been non-devotees, prior to taking up Krishna consciousness. We may have experienced those conditions of intense anxiety. Maybe some of us are, devotees from birth, but it's a terrible thing. And yeah, even as devotees, sometimes devotees experience anxiety in the beginning stages of the development of their Krishna consciousness. But Srila Prabhupada explains that one of the earliest symptoms of the effects of chanting Hare Krishna is that you experience relief from all anxiety. It just melts away. No more anxiety. But material life is fraught with all kinds of difficulties. There are always problems. There are endless sources of anxiety, and you just can't really, it's like whack-a-mole. You can try to deal with this or that, but there's constantly something popping up, and that's just the nature of the material world. So there are always sources of anxiety. But life in the animal species is particularly bad. One living entity is food for another, and you always have to be fearful. In the human species, we enjoy the luxury of being able to experience fear recreationally. People will go to see a horror movie to induce fear. and they'll enjoy the intensity of emotion with the understanding that, well, that I'm not really subjected to this horror or fearful situation, but I can get a little taste of what that might be like, and they think that that's some kind of enjoyment. Um, we see a movie about some horrible monster, some terrifying, hideous thing that is predating human beings, and we momentarily feel some sense of dread or terror. Godzilla is tearing up the city, but in the animal species, these are real experiences. They actually experience horrible monsters coming to eat them, and it's sometimes an unavoidable thing. Generally, usually, always, it's just day-to-day life in the animal species. If you're an insect, um, I don't know if you've ever seen a spider close up, but they can appear quite terrifying. They typically have uh, very large fangs, which are hard to see unless you look really close up, and they two large fangs that inject a venom that is incredibly painful if you're an insect. Um, Human beings, although generally spiders are all venomous, we don't experience them in the human species because most spiders have mandibles that are too small to be able to get them around any part of a human body, so they're unable to bite us. But if you're an insect, you can get bitten, and that bite, just like a bee sting, we experience a bee sting as being quite painful. But imagine having a tiny body, an insect size, and getting a sting like that. It's a tremendous amount of venom dumped into your system. The pain can't be imagined. But this is the kind of thing that insects have to experience, that they're maybe captured in a web and they see this hideous monster coming after them, and he just sinks his fangs in and starts digesting their body, dissolving their insides, and sucking all of their innards out of their exoskeleton, um, while they are alive initially. A deer is attacked by a lion, a tiger, and dragged to the ground, and the tiger just immediately begins eating. He doesn't kill it. There isn't a killing process. It's just capture it and start chewing. And until the animal bleeds out and loses consciousness, he has to experience all of that. So it's unimaginably hellish. Uh, Terrible thing. There are species that are they're just food for everyone. Rabbits are completely defenseless. They are one of the major sources of food for uh, a host of higher uh, level predators. Their only means of surviving as a species is that they reproduce prodigiously. They just they produce a lot of offspring on a very regular basis. The females, anytime a male approaches them, they immediately ovulate on the spot, and so it it's in effect it's like they're always fertile. So and the males are ever ready, you could say. So rabbits produce a lot of offspring, and that's how the species survive. But they feed a whole bunch of higher order predators. Terrible way to live. Constant terror. You have to constantly watch out and be vigilant. And if you're detected by a predator, chances are you're going to get eaten. You can try to flee, but um, usually doesn't work out well. So Anxiety in every species. No anxiety in spiritual life, though. It's conspicuous by its complete absence. No anxiety. Um, just uh, just blissful, ecstatic Krishna consciousness. Wouldn't that be nice? At least I can speak for myself. I'd like to be free of anxiety. And I can tell you that, no, my experience, after, I don't know, almost 70 years of trying to mitigate my fears and anxieties, I have failed utterly. No amount of adjustment uh, of your material life really affects any kind of positive change to that miserable condition. There's only one solution, and that's the cultivation, of course, of Krishna consciousness. That solves the problem. Otherwise, doesn't matter what you do. You may be fabulously wealthy. Some people think that, if I had a lot of money, that would relieve a lot of my anxieties. And I can tell you from practical experience that, at times I have had a lot of money, and it it actually did not relieve my anxieties. Perhaps, some of my $10 problems were solved, but it introduces a host of new anxieties that you might not imagine or guess at. There's just always anxiety, and there's no escaping it. So, chanting Hare Krishna is the solution, and we're very fortunate to be blessed to have that knowledge and the opportunity to do that. Um, and chanting is, I say, that it's the solution to everything. And recently, when Hridayananda Maharaj was here, he made some mention of the fact, one of his, he described as kind of a pet peeve for him, and I took special note because I feel the same way. Devotees will some say that, I need to work on this or work on that. They talk about addressing various issues in their efforts to advance in Krishna consciousness, dealing with various shortcomings and so on. The way Hridayananda Maharaj put it, he said, well, how are you going to do that? How are you going to work on that? The only, you actually cannot affect changes in your consciousness. You cannot remove your attachments, hard as you try. You can't eliminate the anarthas. The only means that we have for affecting those changes is primarily the chanting of Hare Krishna. Krishna removes the anarthas. We get Krishna's help in various ways by hearing and chanting his holy names, and by reading the books and associating with advanced Vaishnavas. But chiefly the process is simply chanting Hare Krishna. And so, if we're going to work on ourselves on this or that problem or shortcoming, that means giving greater attention to chanting quality rounds, rising early and chanting as early in the day as possible with as much attentiveness as possible, as fully conscious as possible without distractions. Trying to eliminate the 10 offenses in the process of chanting Hare Krishna. That's really um, the crux of the whole process, just trying to hear and chant without offense. If we can do that, we can solve every problem in a moment, and we can solve the problems of life in a moment by chanting even one syllable of the holy names, if we can do that without offense. That's what we're trying to achieve, just to become offenseless in our chanting. It's kind of the process in a nutshell. And there's so many other things that we do that are um, that help us to achieve that. And so the association of devotees becomes important. Um, we have to be respectful in our dealings with devotees. If we offend devotees, then that will affect our ability to chant. Um, we well, at least some of us recite every day the Shikshastakam. Shanada Pisani Chanata or Pizza Hishuna Manina Manadina Kirtaniya Sada Harihi. Kirtaniya Sada Harihi. One can chant the holy name constantly in that state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw on the street, more tolerant than a tree, ready to offer all respect to others. Because if you don't have that mentality, then your chanting will be interrupted. You will not be able to chant, or you won't be able to chant as effectively if you commit any offense towards others. Um, that will affect the quality of your chanting very significantly. So, in the proper state of mind, a humble state of mind, you will experience no interference in the process of hearing and chanting the holy names. And so, therefore, you can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. I've gone off on a tangent here. Oh, Sri Radha Damodar are here. Jai Sri Radha Damodar. Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Prabhu, I thank you for a nice class. I also want to um, I just had to make a comment about your super excellent TLAC. I'm really appreciating your TLAC. Every time you give class, I see that you have excellent TLAC, which is actually important. All of our acharyas have stressed the importance of TLAC. Srila Prabhupada regarded it as compulsory. We must have TLAC prominently displayed at all times, and he set that example. So you have really first-class TLAC, and I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Thank you for glorifying chanting of the holy name. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shri Shri Radha Damodar ki jai. Hare Krishna.